Hello, everybody, and welcome to Answers for June 9th, 2020. I'm Kevin Daly. On today's Answers, there will be a school update. There will also be a school at home update from Audra Talbot. My guest this week on Answers is Sarah Moon, who is Director of Special Services at Learn. And as always during this webinar, there will be time for Q&A with participants. So get ready to tap that Q&A button. Send us your question when you have it. Don't wait till the end. We want to hear from you sooner than that. Answers is brought to you by PATH, Parent to Parent, Family Voices of Connecticut, a nonprofit organization which for more than 30 years has served families of children with special health care needs. Here you see in front of you a partial list of PATH programs and services, by the way, which are provided at no cost to families. I just wanted to focus on one facet of PATH, which is the genetic resources that PATH offers. PATH has partnered with two genetic companies to provide information on genetics and genetic screening. Now, this is not the kind of genetic testing that will tell you if your great-great-great-great-great-grandfather was Napoleon, or if your family tree is filled with Neanderthal DNA. It's not that kind of testing. We provide information about testing that is used by professionals, healthcare professionals who use it to diagnose or identify a propensity towards a lot of different conditions. Some of them you see in front of you. That's just a partial list. If you'd like to know more about genetics and genetic screening, go to PATH's YouTube channel where we have videos about genetics. And if you have any questions about genetics that you'd like to look up on the PATH website or questions about PATH, be sure to visit PATH at pathct.org. For more information about today's webinar, please contact me directly, Kevin Daly, at this email address you see in front of you. While you're online, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and watch our videos on YouTube, where we ask you to like and subscribe. Here comes the fine print, folks. This webinar is not legal advice. It shouldn't be taken for healthcare advice either. It's actually a webinar about searching for answers at a time when people have more questions than answers. I'm one of those people too. And back in March, when the craziness started, I actually wrote a haiku about it. Thought I saw it all in special education. Turns out I was wrong. This webinar and any attached materials are the sole property of PATH and are not to be used for any other purpose without the express written permission of PATH. Here's the school update for June 9th, 2020. Schools across the nation continue to be closed, except in the states of Wyoming and Montana. Looking back at events since March, when the craziness started, this has been a historic era with the shutdown of schools in the United States. At its peak, the shutdown affected 55 million students in 124,000 public and private schools across the country. In Connecticut, it affected more than 1,300 schools and Connecticut's 500,000 or so student population. Now that the school year is ending, though, attention is being turned towards when schools will be opening. And that is a big question mark. What about in Connecticut? When will schools be opening in Connecticut? Well, the governor's roadmap for reopening Connecticut, which was issued on May 26th, says full reopening approximately September 1st. This is public schools. Full reopening approximately September 1st. However, that's only if the following conditions are met satisfactorily. If only these safeguards you see here are met. Can the schools open? But will teachers and students want to go to school when the schools open? In a survey that was released by the Connecticut Education Association, which is the largest teacher union in the state of Connecticut, teachers were asked when they think students should return to the classroom. They answered by saying about 2/5 were unsure. About a third of them said in the fall. 16% replied as soon as possible. The 16% is probably all parents. And 13% said when a vaccine is available. And the same survey asked Connecticut teachers if the crisis would permanently change public education. 3 out of 4 teachers said yes. When teachers were asked if they are at a higher risk for severe illness from the virus, 43%, nearly half, responded that they are at higher risk. And that number rises to 71% for teachers who have 30 years or more experience. 64%, nearly 2/3 of teachers who were polled, said their schools are not equipped for the frequent hand washing of students and staff to reduce the spread of the virus. So, are we ready to go back? Well, in a nationwide poll of teachers and parents that was published by USA Today on May 26th, 2 in 5 teachers say it's unlikely they will return to their classrooms if schools open up in the fall. This could cause a potentially massive wave of resignations, massive. 50% of parents who have at least one child in grades K through 12 say they would be likely to pursue at-home learning options instead of sending their kids back to school. And that number soars to 30%. 30% of those parents said that they are very likely to do that. So there are many unanswered questions about schools, the reopening, everything. I think the greatest question is, what will the schools be like when they reopen? We don't have guidance on that from the state yet, but one can get a preview by looking at the rules for operating summer schools that were issued by the governor on June 1st. According to the rules, face masks must be worn. Everyone wears a face mask, both on school property and on the school bus, except when wearing a face mask would interfere with an individual's health or safety. Social distancing, that's the rule these days. Social distancing at 6 feet whenever possible should be maintained. And that's on school property and on the school bus, except when staff members are accompanying students or accommodating them with special healthcare needs or disabilities who require direct contact. In the classroom, we now have the 10-to-1 rule. Classrooms are limited to 1 teacher and 10 more individuals. For students with specialized learning needs, it's suggested to keep these classrooms at a ratio of 5-to-1 and no greater than 7-to-1. Also in the classroom, children and adults, they both count towards that 10-to-1 size limit. And the space between desks should be maximized whenever possible, with desks turned to face all in the same direction. On the school bus, a bus monitor must ride on the bus at all times. The aim is to monitor student distancing and the use of face masks. Only 1 student seated per row, unless they are from the same household, and students seated no closer than every other row. School-wide recommendations and requirements. Keep the same group of adults and students together each day when possible. Give students their own cubby or locker for personal items, and use no-touch entrances, exits, bathroom fixtures wherever possible. Also school-wide, it's recommended to stagger arrival and dismissal times to reduce contact, And open the window. Maximize ventilation using fresh air instead of recycled air. And of course, the school nurses will be conducting constant health assessments. And after school, everything gets cleaned, disinfected, and sanitized. But still, we really are wondering, we're left to wonder what is going to happen when schools reopen. Despite all these indicators, there are still many unanswered questions about what will happen. And when we have answers, you'll find them here. That's the thing about questions and answers. You answer one question, and it just leads to more questions. It's like the many-headed Hydra from Greek mythology. Cut off one head, two more shall appear in its place. Questions are like that, aren't they? On the next edition of Answers, it will be July 14th because we are taking a break. We will be back in 1 month. After a month, we are going to pursue more questions and provide more answers. But first, we are going to take that break. But we'll be back on July 14th, Tuesday, July 14th, 6 p.m. After that, we will return in August for our regular weekly format. And that's the next edition of Answers. Coming up is my live interview with Sarah Moon, who is Director of Special Services at Learn. But now we're going to hear the School at Home update with Audra Talbot. Earlier, Audra talked with Kelly, who's a mother of two in Northwest Connecticut. Let's listen to their conversation.
Hi, I'm Audra Talbot, and welcome. Tonight, I have the honor of interviewing Kelly. Kelly is the parent of two daughters that she has been homeschooling since the beginning of the COVID crisis. Kelly, could you tell us a little bit about your daughters so we have some background?
Yes, thank you for having me. I do have one daughter in 6th grade enrolled in the Magnet School. She does have a 504 in place. She's been diagnosed with ADHD, high-functioning autism, Asperger's, as well as executive functioning disorder. I also have another daughter in 2nd grade, also enrolled in the Magnet School system, and she has an IEP in place for a very long list of things, including intellectual disability. She receives services like speech therapy, OT, special education. So she has definitely a more complex amount of services.
What have your daughter's schools been doing to keep their learning going at home?
I have to say both of the schools, because I have one in the elementary school and one in the middle school, both the same Magnet School system, but two different schools because of elementary and middle school. And I have to say they were wonderful as far as kind of a drive-by loaner Chromebook pickup type of thing, because I really was concerned. We don't have the financial means to have each person have an electronic at home. And I was really concerned. I also have to do my job from home. So I'm using my screens to do my work from home. So they were really wonderful about getting that technology to us in a safe way in the very beginning, so they could each have their own setup. Kind of, here's your desk, here's your loaned Chromebook from school, so you could do your schooling on it. So I was very pleased with that. As far as I guess I would say the system that they use, I think if I'm using that word right, my 2nd grader uses Seesaw, and I really think it is perfect for her age group. It's a lot of, the teacher can voice record the instructions because she intellectually cannot read. So it's important to have those instructions read to her. Otherwise, of course, I'm reading them to her. So that has been really nice that the teachers are able to do that. And then instead of typing the answers back, because she really doesn't have the functionality to do that, she's able to record her voice for the answer back. So she's able to do some of the assignments by her recording her voice. and it really makes her happy to hear her own voice. And she gets excited to hear the recordings that she does to complete her work. And then Seesaw allows the teachers to be able to comment on her work. So I'm able to read the comments that they put, or they'll put, hearts or thumbs up or different things. So the Seesaw platform, if that's what it's called, is really working good for her on an elementary school level. My sixth grader has a Power School platform. And that, to me, is good for checking how things are going. Because she has the executive functioning, it's hard for her to stay organized with her tasks. So it's good for me to be able to check on her. Did you do these assignments? It looks like this one's still missing. So that has been helpful for me as a parent to be able to kind of follow up. Since she's in middle school and there's such an independence about that, it's been helpful in that way. So as far as the platforms that the schools are using and the devices that they provided, that part I'm extremely pleased with.
What's it like at home during the day? Can you give us an example what your school day looks like at home?
Yes. For my sixth grader, I definitely will say this distant learning is easier for her because she has the high functioning autism. So she, intelligent wise, can really just run with it. She struggles socially. So for her, she's really loving not having to be social. But as a parent, I know that's one of her struggles, and going to school really helped her with that struggle. It helped her face the struggle and work on the struggle, and having the teachers in place knowing her diagnosis and knowing what she had, her counselors, everyone. I really think that that's something that this distant learning is not good about. She socially is not talking to anyone. She doesn't have friend groups. She's at an age where we don't have all those technology things for her, like phones and social media and that type of stuff. She's just too young for that. So I think she's missing out socially. But she'll get up about 7:30 in the morning, eat her breakfast. School will start at 8:30 with her first Zoom meeting. So she gets on with Zoom meeting with her classmates and her teachers. She will always participate. She really loves academics. So she will always participate, but she will socially make sure that her screen is not on video, if I'm saying that right.
Yes.
So she doesn't want to participate in that way. So she might be in her pajamas and not want to participate, or she wants her voice to be heard, but she doesn't want to be seen. So she socially is struggling with this distant learning. And she'll do her Zoom meetings throughout the day. They have a very good structure of Zoom meetings, and then check in if you have questions. But she's done with her Zoom meetings at her school before noon, Monday through Thursday. So to me, in my eyes, she's basically going to school Monday through Thursday, 8 to noon, and then she's done.
Yeah.
So we'll take a lunch break, and then we'll go on Power School, and I'll review what she has to do. And she does have a little bit of work to do, but it's so clear to me that she's not getting as much academics as she did being there. And she definitely is not getting the socialization piece that she so struggles with her diagnosis. And I really worry about what a shock that's going to be to her when she does go back eventually. That will definitely be a shock.
Yeah, I agree. I think going back, a lot of our kids that have those social difficulties, the emotional social difficulties.
Absolutely.
That's absolutely, you nailed it. You said it was a shock, and that's my biggest worry. And then also beyond that, transitioning back into school, just above and beyond everything else, I think that's going to be one of our biggest difficulties. Hopefully, knock on the wood, back to school.
I agree. I do think that's going to be very hard for her, yes.
Yeah. Did you run into any difficulties getting started with distance learning? You said that the Chromebook, which I think it's great, your district was distributing Chromebooks. I know that was throughout the state that was happening, but a lot of people still didn't were able to access online learning through Chromebooks. So that was a great example that your district was doing that. But were there any other difficulties getting started for you personally?
I would say that we did have a few hiccups in just the platforms were overloaded. So they would say Seesaw's down today, or Zoom is overloaded today. So I think in the beginning we had several days where it was what we called a hiccup and the system was just overloaded, and we didn't have that. One of our Chromebooks was having some trouble with the typing function, but it's my little one who really uses the record function anyways. So I really just think getting used to it and getting out of the pajama mode is a real struggle in my house.
Yeah.
I think it gives a really laid back attitude. I personally love the reason why we're doing distant learning. I want my kids to be safe and I want my kids to be healthy. So I understand why we're doing distant learning and I love that piece of it. But I really think it's too much screen time. I think it's too laid back, and I think it's not enough academics for special needs kids.
What kinds of things are you doing at home to support distance learning?
With my second grader, I would say that it's really difficult because she says to me, "Be mommy."
Oh.
So she doesn't want me to be her helper, as I've tried calling it, her teacher, her assistant, her para. I don't really know. I try all different names to call it, but she keeps really yelling at me saying, "Be mommy." So she really doesn't want me to be in that role. So it's a real struggle.
Yeah.
Her getting onto the Zoom with her special education teachers, she has no problem with, because that's face to face. She's talking, she's getting the praise. But it's the assignments that are left for me to do with her or for her to go onto a learning website. It's honestly a little bit of begging and bribery. It really is. She really is not interested in me being in that role. She keeps saying, "Be mommy."
How often do you talk to your daughter's teachers?
For my sixth grader, not at all.
Oh.
There really is it's so independent, which she likes, but I don't. For my second grader, this is something that I struggle with. She was one-on-one para full-time, so 33 hours a week, I think, is our last number that we had. So she now has 30-minute Zoom meetings Monday through Thursday, once a day. So she's getting 2 hours a week. Yeah. She went from 33 hours of a para to 2 hours. One will be math, one will be speech and OT together, and one will be just special ed in general. And then she has kind of a social life skills type of thing with the social worker. So she's really only getting 2 hours of Zoom meetings, one-on-one special ed. So hard to go from 33 to 2. Some of the websites that they've provided, she definitely struggles. And I learned to not really help her along, because then those websites advance her level. And then she gets more and more frustrated. So I don't correct her. I let her get those things wrong, so then the teacher can see what she's getting wrong and what level she really should be at. Because if I'm helping her along and doing the work for her, it's just going to get harder and harder, and she's going to get more and more frustrated.
I agree. And plus, it's going to skew the data. And that's kind of like, as a special ed advocate, that's where I live. Like, it's all about the data. And if we're helping our kids so much that we're doing it for them, it's going to skew the data, and then those progress marks are going to come back and be like, "Oh, look at this progress." Well, it's not true.
Yes.
Yeah. So I agree with you. And so that brings me into my next question, Kelly, is, do you think they're making progress?
That's a tough one.
I know. And I almost hate asking that question, but I think that this is the truth. And I think a lot of other parents need to see that we are going through the same thing. It's, at least in our house, progress is minimal, if any.
I would have to agree. I think it's impossible.
Yeah.
I mean, I praise to extreme. I make it seem like she just won the Olympics when she does I'm talking about my second grader, when she does something. So the praise is really there, but how could she possibly be making progress with 2 hours of special ed when she used to get 33? I just think it's impossible. Yeah. So I think the progress is minimal because I'm doing it. We're doing it. We're doing the work. We're chunking it. We're taking a lot of breaks. We're incorporating learning in everything that we do. So the progress is there, but how could she possibly? That's just not enough.
In your opinion, Kelly, do you think your daughters miss going to school?
I've asked them. We've had that conversation. And my sixth grader says she loves this distant learning because she doesn't have to socialize with anyone.
Right.
So having a special need that involves social struggles, she loves it. But as I mentioned before, as a parent, I don't think this helps her future I've talked to her about it's a life skill. You may have to live at college with someone, have an apartment with someone, get married, have a job, whatever it might be. So socializing is a life skill, and you're unfortunately in the middle of a pandemic and distant learning and quarantining, you're not getting that life skill. So that she will tell you she loves distant learning, but I don't know if I agree with that.
Yeah.
My little one, my second grader, she tells me, I miss my friends, I miss recess, I miss school, I miss my teachers. But I can tell there's an interesting piece of it. She is less overstimulated, less stressed as far as like a group. I felt that sometimes with the classroom, she could clearly see that she might not be at a second grade level. So I think that stress is away. Mm-hmm. So she will tell me, no, she doesn't want to be at home anymore. She wants to go to school because she is very social and she misses that connection. And to be honest with you, she might not be able to verbalize this, but she's got to miss the amount of help that she got at school. Going from 33 hours of para special ed help to 2, she's got to miss that. Even though she might not be able to complete that together, mm-hmm. she's got to.
Have you heard anything from your daughter's school about what next year will be like?
They have said, see you in the next grade. They're very good about next week. I think they'll be meeting some of their new teachers on a Zoom meeting from their next grade. So they're saying, see you for the next grade. But I, as a parent, maybe am a little bit more cautious. I want the kids to know that there is a possibility that in the fall you will be going to your school building to the next grade. Mm-hmm. But there's also a possibility that you will not, or you may be in a modified way because we need to keep you safe and healthy. So I don't want to get their hopes up. The school's not saying yes or no, but they're kind of giving the hints that we'll see you in the fall.
I'd like to know your opinion on distance learning. Does it work for your daughters? Honest opinion.
I have kind of a two-part answer to that because I agree with distant learning when I think about my children are safe and they are healthy. I think distant learning is wonderful for that reason. Do I think that they're getting what they need academically? No, I don't. Or socially? No, I don't. It's just such a hard question because my primary focus is for them to be safe and healthy. So I know that this is the way that it has to be. But my daughter who needs more special education, I worry about the regression with her. My daughter who needs more socialization, I worry about the integrating back in with her. I worry about them both taking steps backwards in this time, and how are they going to get back into whatever school is.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
I don't think so. I think I just really want to thank you for having me, and I love the feeling to know that I'm not alone, and I wanted to do this because I really hope that it helps other parents, and we can all stick together and help each other and help the kids get through this.
Well, I have the same exact sentiment, and that's why I do it. I don't do it for any other reason. My pure motivation is to have us kind of bond together and get through this. And it sounds, like we are doing that. If you and I can help one other parent out there get through their next day, then we've succeeded. So thank you, Kelly. I really appreciate you spending your time, because I know that is hard to come by. And I want to just welcome you to come back anytime you want to share your story. So that's it for us tonight. Thank you for joining me. I'm Audra Talbot, and this is PATH, Parent to Parent Family Voices of Connecticut. Thank you. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, Audra. That was such an interesting interview with Kelly.
Oh, thanks, Kevin. It was really a pleasure to interview Kelly, because she definitely has her hands full, and she's working from home. But I think it speaks to what we're all going through right now. And our stories are similar, but they're different, in so many ways. But it's a struggle for sure. But she perseveres, and so I appreciate that about her.
Okay, so thank you, Audra.
Thanks.
And coming up next is my live interview with Sarah Moon, the Director of Special Services at Learn. Hi, Sarah.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for joining me on Answers Today.
Thanks for having me.
So, you are with Learn. I was wondering, for starters, if you could explain, what is Learn?
Sure. So Learn is the Regional Education Service Center in the southeastern or shoreline portion, little corner over here of Connecticut. We're one of 6 regional education service centers in the state, and we work together to form the RESC Alliance. Our role is really to support districts in any kind of educational, finding solutions, enhancing the quality of education. We support, at Learn, we support 24 districts. I believe that's 25 towns, 24 districts. And we do a lot of different things. We provide professional learning for people. We have coaching, we have services. We have 4 magnet schools in southeastern Connecticut, all of which we are part of through our special Student Support Services Department for Special Education. We have 3 magnet schools in the Hartford region, and we also have outplacement programs and some partnership work that we do with districts. So lots of exciting things happening at Learn.
That's such a big operation. Now, you are the Director of Special Services at Learn. What does your job entail?
I am. So it's just funny. That's a funny question to answer. I don't know, people, when we sit back and reflect, like if somebody says to you, you're a parent and what does your job entail? And you start going through the list of things, it can be an interesting exercise. But basically, I think that, my role as part of our Student Support Services leadership team and part of the Learn leadership team is really to do our best to ensure that all students have access to high quality education and supports and services, that they all can become successful members of their school community, their home community, and really lead full lives and be happy. There's lots of details that go into that charge, but that's really at the heart of the work I do as the Director of Special Services. I have the great fortune to work with a lot of wonderful related services staff and special education teachers who are really innovative in their thinking and excited about the work that they're doing with kids. And my favorite part of my job is connecting with families and students, and also our district partners that are working with us to support those students and families.
I see. My next question actually has two parts. Either that or it's two questions with different endings, same beginning, different ending. I'm going to ask you, what have the Learn Schools been doing to keep learning going for students while schools are closed? The second part of that is, what have the Learn Schools been doing to keep learning going for special education students since the schools are closed?
Good question. And from what I understand, it sounds like we are doing similar work to a lot of the districts that surround us. I know that it's a little bit different in various parts of the state, depending on when the closure started and what things have looked like. But one of the most exciting things I think that the Learn team was able to do is they were really able to work regionally with our group of school districts when all of the closure first began, and to work in smaller curriculum groups with people across different districts to create some learning activities, online curriculum for various educators to access at the different schools. And so that was a really great regional approach to getting some immediate and high quality education out to kids. I was excited to see, I think when everything happened, people probably wanted to go into a state of paralysis. And so it was exciting to see that not happen and to see things start to move. At Learn, we followed a 3-phase approach. So our first phase was really getting those kind of general education activities and things parents can do with their kids to keep them learning out to families. The second phase, we really looked at moving their schooling into the virtual arena, mostly in the area of asynchronous or indirect, not on a video call type of work. And then phase 3 happened shortly after that, when we were able to start to begin to incorporate some live lessons for students. We followed that same pattern with special education supports and services. We moved slowly and methodically to ensure that once we were up and running with our direct synchronous services for kids in phase 3, that they were going to be meaningful. And that parents really were wanting them if that is what we were going to do. So we spent a good amount of time those first few weeks really connecting with our families of students who have IEPs and 504 plans, finding out what they think or thought would work for them and their children, and then developing from there. We used a process where we created similar to an IEP matrix. We used a matrix and a guiding questions document to think through each child's strengths and challenges and how those might be different in this learning environment at home than they are in a school building. And then the teams created programming for each student from there.
Well, all this is very innovative, and some of it, you and your associates are doing for the first time, or you're doing what you've done many, many times, but in a different way. As you went through these phases, what kind of barriers did you run into that you had to overcome? I mean, things like technology or others. What did you run into, and how did you overcome it?
So I think we probably encountered all the barriers that everybody did. So the big one was technology, and then getting technology, all the right technology, into everyone's hands. And then that should have probably been a big sigh of relief, right? The technology's been handed out. The kids who use AAC devices to communicate have them in their hands, and they have their Chromebooks. And I think that the next barrier was, okay, so it's been delivered. Does everybody know how to use it? Both from the staff perspective and from the student and parent perspective. And so we needed to continue to do a lot of those individual connections, sometimes via phone, to really coach families through how to access their sometimes open their laptop and turn it on, or their Chromebook, and then how to access the different platforms that we were or apps that we were hoping to use for students to support their learning. So lots of family coaching was going on at that time. Family coaching has, you're going to hear me talk about that a lot during this time, because that's really emerged as such an important service delivery model for our kids, that coaching aspect while they're at home. I think that, you know, at the heart of the challenge was, as I said earlier, there's a lot of things we can do, but are those things going to be meaningful? And that's an easier question to answer for individual students when you have access to their families than it is to make a kind of overall system-wide, this is our approach. So in terms of barriers, I think it's been challenging to hear a lot of different things from families and students about what works for them, and to have those things be very discrepant from what might work for another family. And if there were more hours in the day, drilling down to the level of what everybody needs and ensuring it's happening immediately would be able to happen. Or if we had, you know, Harry Potter's time turner thing. But I do think, time has been a barrier. You know, people want to get everything into everybody's hands right away. And keep kids learning, but we really need to do that thoughtfully and methodically to ensure that what we're doing is meaningful, and that we're not shutting kids and families off from wanting to participate in distance learning that's not meaningful.
Well, it seems it's quite likely the pandemic just might give you more hours to fine-tune things before it's done. Let's hope not, but that's all very interesting. Now, I've heard that in many school districts, a lot of them are in the large cities in Connecticut, they're frustrated by the number of ghost students who they haven't heard from since schools closed. These are students who are AWOL, or there has been some contact, but students aren't turning in their assignments. The Hartford Courant reported in May that on an average, 20% of Hartford students are not participating in distance learning. And they do both kinds there, high tech, low tech. Are you seeing this phenomenon happen in the Learn schools as well?
Yeah, I think to some extent we have seen some of that. We really, you know, again, took the approach of kind of slowly and methodically going through that process of family contacts and asking those questions about what's going to work for you. I think through making those contacts and connections, and, you know, having everybody on that that same path, like we are going to do this, we are going to reach out to these families. We were able to access most of our families. You know, whether or not those families were able to help their students, or if those students were able to engage with learning on a regular basis, is another question. And I think what we found through having those conversations with families is that the reasons why some of those students are unable to participate might vary from what we expected. So we might think teenagers aren't engaging in their online learning because learning is hard for them, and you know, they're out of school, and so they're not going to come on to do it. But what we found through our conversations is that actually a lot of our teenage students were helping care for other family members, or they were the one whose job didn't get cut, and they could go to their position in their job and get more hours and help support the family. So I think we are taking an approach of, you know, much like we do around chronic absenteeism and truancy, where we really look to see what is the function of the behavior, and, you know, why is this happening? Because if we put a one-size-fits-all approach on how we're going to support these students who haven't been accessing their learning, it's not going to work for everybody involved.
when the schools reopen, what do you think will become of these ghost students who missed at least a third of the school year and have not set foot in a school building until, well, hopefully, if all goes well, September 1st? Uh, won't they be a challenge to educate?
I think it's going to be interesting to have all students are going to be a challenge to educate in their own and different ways. But yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this and what that might look like, and reading a lot. And, you know, I do think, going back to what I shared earlier about, you know, why weren't you accessing your online learning, is going to help us decide how to support that student to access next steps when we are back in the building. I feel like our teachers, our general education teachers, are going to need a lot of support and coaching from our in collaboration with our special education teachers and related services staff, to really think through probably an even broader spectrum of differentiation than they're currently used to doing. And so that we're able to meet all students where they're at, and to really help students go from there. I think the idea of, you know, we're not going to start where we left off. We need to re-engage students. We need to learn where they've been. We need to find out where they are. And then we need to look for some ways to re-engage them. And if I put my rose-colored glasses on, which I do like to do every once in a while, I'd say that I think and I hope that all of these children are going to be so tired of being in their houses that they are going to run into the school buildings and just be so ready, maybe for at least a couple days, or maybe a couple minutes anyway, to re-engage with their teachers and friends. And I'm hoping we can build on some of that positive momentum to help re-engage everyone.
Well, I'd like to think the teachers and staff will show the same enthusiasm as those students. But yeah, obviously things are going to be different. It's going to take a lot of collaboration, a lot of thinking, exploring, but I've found that school people by and large are a creative bunch. And if anyone can tackle that job, I think it's public education.
I agree. I have been amazed at some of what I've seen. You know, most of our educators, or many of our educators, I should say, have children at home, and they are still coming up with these unbelievably creative ideas and reaching out to families in a way to create connection and help keep that momentum going. So thank you for saying that, Kevin.
Let's talk about evaluations for a second. I know this is a topic of great concern to a lot of parents because regularly scheduled evaluations have been missed. Evaluations that were a work in progress are essentially stuck in neutral. And then when school starts up, there will be the evaluations that are regularly scheduled for the fall. By the time schools reopen, the special educators will be faced with a mountain of missed evaluations. How are they going to handle it? Could assessment by video conference be part of the solution?
So this is a hot topic, and one that a lot of the related services groups and communities have been tackling. So I'm a speech pathologist by training, and our speech and language groups have been talking a lot across the state about this idea of assessment virtually. I know that the Association of School Psychologists has put out a statement around this. Our RESC Alliance colleagues who do assistive technology evaluations have put out some statements around our ability to do things virtually. It's a really hard topic to tackle, question to tackle. We need to think through the fall, as you said, and I've heard from so many speech pathologists in particular who have said to me, I'm so worried about the fall because all of my kids are going to need me for intervention. And I haven't seen them since March except on Zoom. And I'm going to need to support them. And special ed teachers have said the same thing. And yet I could potentially be doing all evaluations in the amount of time I have to be at my job. And so that's a concern that we're definitely hearing from related services staff and teachers, as well as parents. In terms of how we approach this assessment, I'll call it an assessment problem. In terms of how we approach it, there's been a lot of information shared about standardized assessments not being able to be used effectively via video. And I believe one of the recent webinars that Pearson, one of the companies that actually publishes a lot of the tests and sells them, agreed that there's a lot of information we can't gather through standardized assessments. There are some people that are feeling really solidly that we shouldn't be gathering any assessment information through virtual means or through other means, phone calls, interview. I think I go back to the idea of asking those assessment questions. And what is the purpose of the assessment? What information are we trying to gather? And is there a non-standardized way that we could potentially gather some of that information that might at least help better inform some present levels in order to move planning forward for a child's IEP? I don't know that will, use air quotes, count as a comprehensive evaluation. But again, if we think of why we're doing the evaluation, what is the purpose of it? I think that there might be some information that we can gather prior to being able to sit with the students. But I am hopeful that we can sit with those students soon and get through some of the standardized assessments that teams feel are absolutely necessary to determine where and how a student is functioning.
Well, I hope that happens soon too. You mentioned your background in speech language pathology, and I've got a question that's a good one for a speech language pathologist.
Great.
Many of our children have IEP goals in the area of speech and language. What can parents do at home to help their children maintain progress in this area? I mean, fun things like activities, games, things the entire family can engage in. What do you recommend?
So first, I want to start by saying there's probably things that parents are doing all day, every day. And, in my work over the years, I've had so many parents come to me and say, I need you to give me things to do with my child so that I know I'm helping them develop their speech and language. And we'll sit back and have a conversation and I'll say, well, tell me a little bit about your day and how you go through it and what happens. And then I'm able to actually highlight all the language strategies, the language development strategies and speech and language strategies that parents are using without even realizing they're using them. So first, I think it's really important that parents give themselves the credit that they deserve for all that they're doing. Second, I think the idea of the fun activities and language development strategies is really important because not everything can be a separate task. I mean, some kids need it to be a separate task, but there's a lot of things we can do just during our natural daily activities that I think can support kids. I go back to some strategies that we often think about using with young children: parallel talk and self-talk. Parallel talk is when you actively describe what another person is doing with young children in their play. And self-talk is when you actively talk about what you're doing. For young children, this helps, give things meaning. It gives actions words, and it helps make connections for them. With older children, it actually helps them to develop some of those metacognitive skills so that they can really think through some higher level language and be aware of how they're processing language. So some things you can do during the day that kind of support what you need to do anyway are just talking about what you are doing. If you are making Kraft macaroni and cheese for dinner and you are ripping open the powdered cheese package, you can say, I am ripping open the powdered cheese. And then you can say, oh, look, it's powdery. You are giving meaning to functional words. You can talk about how you're stirring the mac and cheese, and the steam is making you feel hot, and you feel so hot that you need ice. And, really choosing your words carefully in those moments is great, and using far fewer words than I'm using right now. As I talk to all of you, if you're helping your child to develop language is really important. So those are some things you can do. Food preparation, meal preparation, driving in the car instead of having the radio on, talking about what you see. I worked with a few families who we set up TV talk. So their kids were used to watching TV, and of course, that is a necessity right now for all of us who have children who are home with them. But they were used to watching TV, and they wouldn't let their moms stop the TV. They had to just sit and watch it. So we set up something separate called TV Talk. So they had their TV time and their TV Talk time. And TV Talk time was when you had extra minutes to watch a show, but it meant that every few minutes we were stopping the movie and commenting on something you just saw, much like you would read a book. So if the last thing I saw on the screen was that Dora opened her backpack, I would say, oh, look, Dora opened her backpack. And you would hope that that would spur the child to make a comment or point to the TV or say something or find their Dora doll. Just make a connection to that. Again, I'm talking about language development for younger children. For older children, you can do the same thing if you're able to preview any shows or movies that tackle some of the topics that they might be struggling with socially or emotionally. And you can watch a little bit and stop and talk a little bit.
I like that approach, especially with the carefully crafted exchanges between parent and child, designed to give more experience or more fulfilling speech language kind of experience. But in just listening to other people talk, isn't that how most folks learn to develop their language skills, by listening to the people around them? And doesn't this take advantage of that strategy?
It does, and we may need to be more purposeful in that, because our children that we're talking about didn't develop that language naturally. So really overemphasizing or over-exaggerating the connections between the things you're talking about or the actions that you're talking about and the words you're using can be very, very helpful. For children who are AAC users or who use augmentative communication systems, who are just learning them, and it feels like a lot for families to have the talker go with them everywhere and have to facilitate that. We encourage them to choose one time during the day and make that talker time, because using it one time in a structured way supported by your family during a functional activity is better than having it with you all day but not using it at all.
Oh, that's quite understandable.
This is my favorite topic. I could talk all day about this, but I will stop.
For my next question, I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball. And this is one of those how they going to do that questions. When the schools reopen, if it's determined that a special ed student has regressed so far that additional services are necessary to restore what was lost, how will it be accomplished? I ask this because there are limitations: the length of the school day, the length of the school year. Also, children learn at their own rate. You can't double the amount of progress a child makes simply by doubling the amount of service in their IEP. So when it comes to catching up these kids who experience severe regression, how are they going to do that?
I wish I had a concrete answer to that. I think first and foremost, we're really going to need to look and see and determine new present levels for all of our students. Where are they? Where are they coming to us? Where did they leave us before the closure? What skills are they coming to us with? I think a lot about the idea of doing diagnostic interventions where we are really working with them to help them develop the skills, but at the same time, we're looking at their rate of growth, almost in an RTI model, but using special education and specialized interventions to see how they're responding to intervention and what rate they're gathering or gaining the skills. Once we're back in school, I think those are going to be important components to think about. I think that we need to think probably differently about our service delivery models. And when I say service delivery models, I refer to, we do pull out students, we push in to work with students, there's co-teaching, there's this idea of consulting and coaching of other staff to be able to, on a daily basis, provide some of the supports and services that are needed. And I think we're going to need to look at all of those models to determine what might be best, because as you said so eloquently, Kevin, doubling the amount of direct intervention isn't necessarily going to result in double the amount of progress. So monitoring that carefully and making adjustments. We put a plan in place, and 6 or 8 weeks in, we are not seeing what we expected to see in terms of growth and progress. Teams are going to need to come back to the table, reevaluate that, and consider the strategies and interventions that they're using, as well as the model that they're using to deliver those services.
Fair enough. Here's a question from one of our participants. If summer school is a yes per the school district, but as a parent, you feel your special needs child is in high risk medically and sensory-wise won't wear a mask and might not understand social distancing, and you feel safer doing distance learning for summer school, is that an option a parent can choose? Will the summer school district provide the technology? Will the child count as attending ESY or not if you say distance learning only? What do you think?
A great list of questions. And I wouldn't want to presume that I could answer for all districts, but I can give some general responses to that. I know from many of the directors in the region that I work in and also outside of that region that they have been reaching out and surveying parents about their comfort level in having kids in person in summer school. From what I understand, currently many districts are using a distance model or a hybrid model, and they are counting those ESY services as services. I believe right now, and I say right now because the guidance changes quite regularly, but I believe right now the guidance from the State Department of Education is that we are planning for summer school as if the regular program were happening, and we're continuing to implement the IEP to the greatest extent possible or the greatest extent plausible, which means that the supports and services that are provided through distance learning, hopefully in a meaningful way, would count as extended school year participation. I believe if a parent opted out of all summer school, if a parent said no thank you, that obviously would not count as any kind of participation. I'm not sure if did I hit all of the topics or some of them?
I believe you did, yes. Yes.
Okay. And I have, we've heard from a lot of families who have students who are more complex medically or have some behavioral challenges or sensory challenges, these same types of concerns. And I feel like the community of educators working closely with the State Department has been really open to hearing parent input around that and not moving forward quickly with decisions that are making people feel very uncomfortable or putting people at risk. I know that's how we're operating at Learn, and I feel that that's how a lot of my colleagues in the field have also been approaching the situation.
It sounds like that approach has potential. One last question.
Complicated.
Pardon me?
It's just also very complicated. I'm sure all of us wish there were more simple and straightforward answers.
I know the feeling. My final question is, someday the pandemic will pass. At that point, we'll be able to look back at current events with 2020 hindsight, and we may find that we learned some lessons along the way. Distance learning may be one of those lessons. It seems to have evolved from a hastily improvised stopgap into a more refined tool that works very well for some students, not all students, but very well for some. Is there a future for distance learning? Does it have the potential to become an effective tool for educators in the future?
So I've had this conversation with a lot of my colleagues, and we're talking a lot about all the things we've learned about kids since and their ability to either meaningfully participate in distance learning or not meaningfully participate in distance learning, or different aspects of it. For the most part, I think we've learned that there are some different tools that we can use to engage kids, perhaps more individually and perhaps more at their level, using some of what we've learned. I think it would be ideal to use what we've learned through distance learning, but not at a distance. So if we have students that are having a harder time because they are on sensory overload, or their attentional issues are very challenging for them, or they are feeling anxious or needing a break, we may have more opportunities for keeping the momentum of the learning moving by using something on a platform or an app until they're able to re-access the classroom. So I think we'll see some changes in terms of how we're thinking through what kids need and how we can support them. My greatest takeaway from all of this is just how powerful this model of consulting and coaching can be. And I've just been floored at the ability of parents to work with staff and take some of what they're sharing and really be able to support their children so beautifully in their learning. And we are seeing some kids make a lot of progress using a coaching model or a family consultation model versus a direct synchronous model. And so I'm hoping that when we're back in school, we can really look at that and think about that and determine what is most meaningful to do directly, and what should we be consulting with other staff or coaching other staff to do. And then how can we also incorporate this, this wonderful parent component where parents are aware of what kids are doing, more aware of what kids are doing, and carrying it over to the home.
Well, I agree. I agree that that is the way to go. It's like the pandemic has forced us, all of us, parents, families, educators, to become more creative. And I think this is all leading to something, at the heels of a terrible tragedy with, thousands and thousands of people dead. That's a very sobering thought. But I think we're at a point where public education is going to go through a metamorphosis and come out of it better and stronger, as we often do after challenges, even people. But I think public education is going to look very different in the future, not just the near future, but for the foreseeable future. Sarah Moon, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and insight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of the parents out there that are supporting their children in their learning all day, every day, while you do all the other things that parents and grown-ups need to do, which is just a huge charge for all of you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And I just wanted to say something, only because this is our last webinar before taking a break. Back in the middle of March, I went to the two people who run PATH with this crazy idea of a weekly webinar, trying to answer some of the questions that were arising like crazy at the time. And not only did they give me the green light, they gave me their full support. So Nancy and Carmina, thank you. Thank you for your support, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to answer some questions. I also want to thank Audra. Audra, your many contributions have made this webinar into what it is. I also want to thank you, Sarah, and the many awesome guests that have been on this webinar. You guys are what make it awesome, certainly not me. I'm just the guy who says you deserve answers to your questions, and I hope I haven't let you down.
Thank you, Kevin.
So take care. We will see you July 14th, 6 o'clock. Good luck until then. Be well.
Good night.